Welcome to Blood and Shadows, the sinister side of ancient myths. In this chilling journey, we dive deep into the dark corners of mythology, where gods demand sacrifice, monsters roam freely, and ancient tales bleed with vengeance, betrayal, and forbidden power. Forget the heroes you thought you knew, these stories expose the brutal truths often hidden beneath myth and legend. From cursed relics to forgotten rituals, we're unraveling the haunting secrets that shaped civilizations. So grab a torch, you're going to need it. The shadows are deep, and what lurks within them may just change how you see history forever. Dark myth retellings. Myths are timeless stories that have shaped cultures, morals, and imaginations for centuries. They tell of gods and mortals, of chaos and creation, of love, war, and sacrifice. Traditionally, myths offered explanations for natural phenomena, human behavior, and societal values. However, as storytelling has evolved, so has the way we interpret these ancient narratives. A particularly compelling modern approach is the dark retelling of myths, reinterpretations that explore the darker, more complex, or subversive aspects of the original stories. This essay explores what dark myth retellings are, why they matter, and how they reflect contemporary culture. Understanding dark myth retellings. A dark myth retelling takes a well-known myth and reimagines it through a lens of psychological complexity, horror, tragedy, or moral ambiguity. Unlike traditional heroic tales that often emphasize triumph, virtue, and divine justice, dark retellings emphasize suffering, injustice, and the hidden motives behind legendary figures. These versions may spotlight marginalized voices, delve into taboo subjects, or invert the original moral structure. The darkness in such retellings can be literal, involving death, madness, or violence, or thematic, dealing with existential dread, betrayal, forbidden love, or human frailty. These stories don't aim to undermine mythology but to peel back the layers and present it in a new, often unsettling light. Why retell myths in a dark way? Dark myth retellings resonate because they mirror the complexities of the modern human experience. In a world where clear-cut heroes and villains are rare, people seek stories that reflect ambiguity, trauma, and internal struggle. These retellings allow us to reclaim silenced voices. Many classical myths were recorded in patriarchal societies that minimized or erased women's perspectives, or those of the villains. Dark retellings often shift the focus to these sidelined characters. Confront harsh truths. Original myths were not always as sanitized as later versions made them. Retellings expose the brutal, primal nature of these stories, including divine cruelty, sexual violence, and human suffering. Offer psychological depth. Modern storytelling leans heavily into character development. Dark retellings add emotional realism to mythic figures, showing their inner demons and motivations. Subvert expectations. By challenging traditional narratives, dark retellings make us question inherited beliefs and explore moral complexity. Key elements of dark myth retellings. To understand the mechanics of these stories, consider the following recurring features. Alternative perspectives. A common approach is to tell the story from the antagonist's point of view, e.g., Medusa or Hades. Moral ambiguity. Characters are neither wholly good nor evil. Gods can be cruel, monsters may be victims. Psychological horror. The horror lies not in external threats but in emotional pain, identity loss, madness, or betrayal. Subversion of power. These stories often critique divine or patriarchal authority, exposing the corruption or injustice inherent in power structures. Blending myth with modern themes. Themes such as trauma, identity, mental illness, feminism, and existentialism are woven into ancient frameworks. Examples in literature. 1. Circe by Madeline Miller. In Homer's Odyssey, Circe is a powerful witch who turns men into pigs. In Miller's Circe, she becomes a nuanced, tragic figure struggling for autonomy in a world dominated by gods and men. The novel reimagines her exile not as punishment but as a path to self-discovery. It is both dark and empowering, examining themes of isolation, abuse, and transformation. 2. The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This retelling of the Iliad focuses on Briseis, a Trojan woman taken as a war prize by Achilles. Unlike the original epic, which glorifies heroism and honor, Barker's version dwells on the trauma of slavery, rape, and voicelessness. The silence is literal. Women are stripped of agency, and metaphorical, showing how myths erase suffering. 3. Lavinia by Ursula K. Le Guin. Based on Virgil's Aeneid, this novel gives voice to Lavinia, a character who barely speaks in the original. Le Guin presents her as intelligent and aware of her fate, exploring themes of predestination and female invisibility. The novel is quietly haunting, filled with reflections on mortality and the burden of being written into myth. 4. House of Names by Colm Tóibín. A brutal retelling of the Oresteia, this novel removes divine influence and focuses on human cruelty. Clytemnestra's murder of Agamemnon and the cycle of vengeance that follows are presented with psychological realism and emotional bleakness. The gods are absent, and morality is murky, perfect ingredients for a dark myth. Dark myth retellings in popular culture. 1. Film, Pan's Labyrinth, 2006. Though not a direct retelling of any one myth, Pan's Labyrinth draws heavily on Greco-Roman and fairy tale tropes, reinterpreting them through the horrors of fascist Spain. The faun, the underworld, the trials, all echo ancient myths, but with a grim, tragic tone. It questions the price of innocence, sacrifice, and the existence of moral clarity. 2. TV, American Gods by Neil Gaiman, adapted by Starz. Gaiman's work places ancient gods in modern America, exploring how they survive, or don't, in a world that no longer believes in them. Characters like Odin, Anansi, and others are stripped of grandeur and shown as manipulative, desperate, or decaying. The story explores power, belief, and identity through a dark mythic lens. 3. Games, Hades by Supergiant Games. This indie hit reimagines the Greek underworld not just as a realm of punishment, but as a home filled with complicated family dynamics. Players control Zagreus, the son of Hades, trying to escape. The game humanizes gods and monsters, revealing insecurities, grudges, and lost love, all wrapped in stylish, tragic storytelling. Reinterpreting mythical figures, from monster to martyr. Dark retellings often hinge on re-evaluating mythical villains. Take Medusa, a classic monster. Traditionally, she is a snake-haired gorgon who turns men to stone. But modern retellings highlight how she was once a mortal woman raped by Poseidon in Athena's temple, then punished by being turned into a monster. In this light, Medusa becomes a symbol of injustice, victim-blaming, and vengeance. Another example is Hades, often cast as the villain in Western media. But in many retellings, he is portrayed as the most just and least cruel of the gods. Some dark retellings, like the Lore Olympus webcomic or A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair, cast him as a brooding, complex anti-hero, often in a romantic light. The psychological dimension. Dark retellings also venture into the psychological landscape of myth. Jungian theory sees myths as manifestations of the collective unconscious, symbolic stories of inner archetypes. A dark retelling becomes a descent into the shadow self, where repressed fears, traumas, and desires live. This approach is evident in retellings like Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis, a revision of the myth of Cupid and Psyche, where jealousy, obsession, and self-deception take center stage. The myth becomes a mirror for the narrator's own soul. Feminist dark retellings. Many dark retellings today are deeply feminist. They question why women are punished for transgressions, why female rage is vilified, and why desire is taboo. Works like A Thousand Ships by Natalie Haynes, which gives voice to the women of the Trojan War. Psyche and Eros retellings, which reframe the story as one of autonomy and consent. And The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek, which tells the Norse myth of Angrboda, the mother of monsters, in a tender yet tragic tone. These stories validate female emotion, rewrite villainy as misunderstood power, and give space to women who were historically mythic footnotes. Cultural implications. Retelling myths darkly isn't just about edginess, it's about re-evaluation. It asks, whose story are we telling? What are we leaving out? What wounds lie beneath the surface? These reinterpretations serve as cultural critique of patriarchy, colonialism, religious authority, or hero worship. They also remind us that myths are not static. They evolve with us. By making them darker, we're not corrupting them, we're allowing them to live in the shadow and the light. Dark myth retellings are more than aesthetic exercises in gloom. They are acts of transformation, taking familiar tales and showing us what lies beneath their golden surfaces. These retellings invite us to revisit the past not with nostalgia, but with clear eyes and deep empathy. They ask hard questions and provide no easy answers. But in doing so, they reaffirm the enduring power of myth, not to comfort us, but to challenge us, to step into the dark, and see what truths may emerge. Gods of the Shadowed World. Across every continent and tradition, buried beneath tales of light and order, lie the darker myths, stories that whisper of destruction, vengeance, madness, and the unknown. These myths aren't just relics of fear, they are cultural reflections of trauma, cautionary tales, and the chaos we all carry within. Each chapter in this collection explores one such entity, not just as a figure in mythology but as a living force haunting the corners of human experience. Chapter 1, Lilith, the First Rebel. In this reimagined account, Lilith is not the monster mothers feared but the first woman who chose herself. Banished from Eden for refusing submission to Adam, she roams the borders of civilization, a protector of the wild and the scorned. They call me demon, succubus, whore. But I was simply the first to say no. The tale unfolds in modern-day Tel Aviv, where a woman plagued by nightmares discovers she's the descendant of Lilith's bloodline. As she uncovers her power, we delve into the deeper roots of Lilith's mythology, born from Sumerian spirits, adopted into Jewish folklore, twisted by medieval demonology. Essay break. Lilith's evolution reflects how society treats female autonomy. From Mesopotamian storm demon to the dark feminist icon, her story is a litmus test of patriarchal anxiety. Chapter 2, Kali, the Mother of Endings. In a village in West Bengal, a drought stretches into its second year. Desperate and half-mad, the villagers resurrect an old rite, calling on the terrible power of Kali. The goddess answers, not with death, but transformation. Her skin is midnight. Her tongue drips blood. Her eyes burn with compassion forged in fire. This fictionalized account blends with historical references to Kali's worship, both as a feared destroyer and a deeply maternal figure. The narrator, a Western journalist seeking exoticism, finds himself unraveling in her presence, until his own ego becomes her offering. Essay break. Kali is not evil. She destroys ego, not innocence. Her dance is the death of illusion, and her bloodlust is symbolic of cutting away falsehood. Western interpretations often miss this, mistaking her for a villain rather than a necessary force. Chapter 3, Hades, the God Who Waits. A grieving father finds himself dreaming of a train that only travels downward. The conductor never speaks, but the passengers weep in silence. At the end of the line is Hades, not with a scythe, but with open arms. I do not take. I receive. The living simply do not understand the weight of rest. Unlike the fiery hell of Christian imagery, the Greek underworld was a place of shadow, not suffering. This chapter humanizes Hades, not as a tormentor, but as the quiet deity of inevitability. In a fragmented story set between grief therapy sessions, the narrator slowly comes to understand the god's true nature. Essay break. Hades was never a devil. His abduction of Persephone, while problematic, was also about balance. Life cannot exist without death, spring without winter. His underworld is not punishment, but permanence. Chapter 4, Anubis, the Guardian of the Dead. Set in the slums of Cairo, a young morgue worker begins to see golden eyes in the dark. Bodies whisper to him. A jackal follows him home. Anubis has returned, not to rule, but to weigh. He will not speak. He does not need to. His silence is judgment. In Egyptian lore, Anubis guides souls to the scales, weighing their hearts against a feather. In this fictional tale, the protagonist begins to witness the truths people carry into death, some so heavy that even the jackal turns away. Essay break. Anubis represents justice beyond human law. He is incorruptible, bound not by revenge or wrath, but by balance. Where modern death is sanitized and hidden, the Egyptians embraced it, and gave it dignity. Chapter 5, The Wendigo, Hunger Without End. In a snow-locked outpost in northern Canada, a research team begins to disappear one by one. The survivors blame the cold, the isolation. But one man knows the truth, he has seen the antlers in the snow. The Wendigo comes when we consume what we should protect. The Wendigo myth belongs to the Algonquin peoples and speaks of a spirit of insatiable hunger, often tied to cannibalism but also to greed, colonization, and environmental destruction. In this horror-tinged chapter, the monster is less a beast and more a creeping sickness. Essay break. The Wendigo isn't just a monster, it's a warning. Against excess. Against losing one's soul to hunger, whether for flesh, power, or conquest. Colonialism, capitalism, and ecological ruin are all modern faces of the Wendigo spirit. Chapter 6, Amatsu Mikaboshi, the Chaos Star. Set in Tokyo, a coder stumbles upon a cursed string of code passed anonymously through the dark web. The code runs itself, deleting everything in its path, an echo of Amatsu Mikaboshi, the Japanese god of chaos. In the beginning, there was nothing. And nothing screamed. In Shinto mythology, Mikaboshi is the dark void that existed before the gods. He is rarely worshipped, rarely acknowledged. But in a world increasingly run by systems and algorithms, chaos is never far behind. Essay break. Most cultures have a chaos before creation deity. Mikaboshi's rare mention in mainstream Shinto reflects a discomfort with pure entropy. Yet in modern times, chaos is not just feared, it's coded into our networks, lurking behind every digital veil. Chapter 7, Tezcatlipoca, the Smoking Mirror. A Mexico City street artist begins to see visions in his murals, of jaguars, blood, and a face hidden in obsidian. Tezcatlipoca, the Aztec god of fate and conflict, is using the art as a mirror to reveal hidden truths. You will never see me, only your reflection in my darkness. Feared and revered, Tezcatlipoca represents both chaos and transformation. He is the god who tears down empires and builds new ones. In this story, the artist becomes a vessel, his art driving people to madness or clarity. Essay break. Tezcatlipoca's mirror forces people to confront their true selves. In the Aztec worldview, gods were not good or evil, they were cycles. Destruction and rebirth. His mirror is not a punishment. It's an awakening. Chapter 8, Pomba Gira, the Crossroads Queen. A sex worker in Sao Paulo begins to dream of red dresses, cigars, and laughter that echoes through graveyards. She lights a candle at a crossroads. The air smells of rum. She has summoned Pomba Gira. I am every woman they told you not to be. Pomba Gira is a spirit in Afro-Brazilian traditions, like Umbanda and Quimbanda, often misunderstood as demonic. But she is the protector of the marginalized, sex workers, queer people, rebels. She thrives at crossroads, literal and spiritual. Essay break. Pomba Gira isn't evil, she's unapologetic. She demands respect, not fear. In cultures where respectability politics reign, she becomes a symbol of defiance, agency, and joy in taboo. These stories are not just horror tales. They are mirrors, myths, and medicine. Across every culture, darkness has a name and a lesson. The gods we fear are often the ones we need most. They are the ones that bring change, rupture silence, and force us to confront the truths we bury. In bringing them to life through fiction and reflection, this collection seeks not to demonize, but to understand. Blood and shadows, power and memory embodied. Symbolism has long served as the secret language of literature, a way for writers to give form to the abstract. Among the countless symbols that weave themselves through the fabric of storytelling, two stand out for their visceral and emotional resonance: blood and shadows. Both are primal and omnipresent, both tied to the body and the soul, and both have been used to communicate deep ideas about power, memory, life, and death. When blood is portrayed as a symbol of power, and shadows as a manifestation of memory, the result is a rich interplay between the physical and the psychological. Through various literary and cultural lenses, this essay explores how blood becomes a currency of strength and legacy, while shadows trace the imprint of memory and the inescapable past. Blood as power. Blood is one of the most ancient and potent symbols in human history. It is essential to life and intimately tied to death. When spilled, it marks a loss, a sacrifice, or an assertion of violence. Yet in its containment, flowing within the body, it suggests vitality, heritage, and strength. In this duality lies its symbolic association with power. In many mythologies and epics, bloodlines signify dynastic power. Consider how phrases like royal blood, noble blood, or tainted blood are loaded with social, political, and moral implications. Blood becomes the vessel through which power is inherited and legitimacy is conferred. In Shakespeare's Macbeth, the imagery of blood grows increasingly oppressive, signifying guilt, ambition, and ultimately a loss of control. Initially, Macbeth sees blood as a symbol of success. His violent ascension to the throne is marked by Duncan's murder, after which he declares, "I am in blood stepped in so far." But the deeper he wades into blood, the more it ceases to be empowering. Blood becomes a trap, symbolic of the tyrannical hold of guilt and paranoia. Power gained through bloodshed becomes unsustainable, leading to ruin. Yet blood is not only a mark of violent conquest, it is also a form of sacrifice, of power given rather than taken. In religious contexts, blood is offered to gods, exchanged for favor or forgiveness. In Christianity, the blood of Christ symbolizes both suffering and salvation. The Eucharist ritual reenacts this symbolic transference of divine power. To drink the wine, symbolizing Christ's blood, is to partake in holy strength and memory. Here, power is sanctified through blood, not as violence, but as spiritual authority and transcendence. Blood also marks transformation and initiation. In many rites of passage, whether literal or metaphorical, blood signals a shift. The shedding of menstrual blood, for example, has been traditionally linked to feminine power and fertility. In contrast, the blood spilt in battle often serves as a proof of masculinity or warriorhood. In both cases, blood marks a threshold, what was before and what comes after. In speculative fiction and horror, blood often takes on supernatural properties. Vampiric lore, for example, casts blood as the source of immortality and sensual dominance. In Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles, the act of drinking blood is simultaneously erotic, violent, and transformative. Blood grants immortality and power but also binds the drinker to memory, morality, and often despair. Here, power drawn from blood is not clean or absolute, it is always tainted by what it cost and what it reveals about the self. In all of these narratives, blood is never neutral. It either grants power or reminds one of the cost of wielding it. It stains, marks, transforms. It flows from ancestors to descendants, from enemies to victors, from martyrs to gods. Blood is the price of legacy, and its symbolism is rooted in the eternal tension between power claimed and power deserved. Shadows as memory. If blood is the language of power, then shadows are the dialect of memory. Shadows are intangible, insubstantial, mere reflections of form, cast by light. But symbolically, they hold enormous weight. A shadow cannot exist without a source, yet it distorts that source, stretches it, bends it depending on the angle and intensity of light. In this way, shadows mirror the nature of memory, always connected to reality, yet never a perfect representation of it. In Plato's allegory of the cave, shadows are central. Prisoners mistake shadows on the wall for reality itself, illustrating the illusion of knowledge without understanding. Here, the shadow is memory unexamined, impression without context. Once freed, the prisoner understands that the shadows were mere echoes of truth. This allegory shows how memory can be a prison of misperceptions, how we often live in the shadow of our experiences rather than facing them fully illuminated. In Gothic literature, shadows embody the haunting nature of memory. In novels like Wuthering Heights or The Turn of the Screw, characters are often literally and figuratively haunted by their pasts. The architecture is shadowy, the past is ever present. Shadows stretch across time, reminding characters and readers that memory is inescapable. The deeper symbolic truth is this: we are all followed by shadows. We cast them wherever we go. They are the remnants of past actions, fears, and desires, flickering across the walls of our lives. Even in more modern psychological fiction, shadows often represent the Jungian concept of the shadow self, the repressed parts of the psyche, hidden from conscious awareness. These shadows contain memory in its rawest, most truthful form. To confront one's shadow is to engage with buried trauma, past sins, and long-lost truths. Memory in this form is not nostalgic or romantic. It is painful, revealing, and often transformative. It reminds us that the past is not gone, it is merely hidden, cast behind us, attached to every step. In fantasy narratives, shadows often take on literal form. In Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, the shadow is synonymous with Sauron spreading evil. It is not only a political or supernatural threat but a symbolic manifestation of corrupted memory, of a time before darkness when things were whole and good. The shadow represents the forgetting of goodness, the distortion of truth. Defeating the shadow means restoring memory, recovering what was lost. In contrast, consider the Japanese concept of mono no aware, an awareness of the impermanence of things. Shadows here are not sinister but poignant. They mark time's passage, the ephemeral nature of beauty and existence. In this interpretation, shadows are memory made visible, not as threat, but as gentle reminder. The falling of cherry blossoms, the changing angle of sunlight in a room, these are shadows of time, of what once was and can never be again. Blood and shadows intertwined. While blood and shadows may seem like separate symbolic systems, one rooted in the body, the other in the soul, they often intersect in profound ways. Both are inescapable, we carry our blood within us, and our shadows follow us wherever we go. One speaks to agency, the other to aftermath. Blood represents what we do, shadows represent what lingers. Consider a battlefield, the blood spilled represents power taken, battles won or lost. But after the soldiers leave, the field remains shadowed by what happened there. Memory clings to the space. Ghosts, literal or figurative, haunt the site. Here, blood is immediate, shadow is enduring. One marks the act, the other the consequence. In literature, characters often undergo transformations in which both blood and shadow play a role. Think of Harry Potter, who carries within him the blood of his mother's sacrifice, which grants him a protective power, while also bearing the shadow of Voldemort's soul, a memory of evil embedded in his very being. His journey is one of reconciling inherited power and inherited trauma. Blood and shadow exist in him simultaneously, each shaping who he becomes. Similarly, in Toni Morrison's Beloved, the character Seath is haunted by the literal shadow of her past, her dead daughter's ghost, born from a memory so painful it ruptures time. But she is also marked by blood. The act of infanticide she commits is both an assertion of maternal power and a tragic sacrifice. Blood and shadow merge, becoming the twin languages of trauma and survival. The body remembers through scars, the soul remembers through hauntings. In our world, too, these symbols persist. Historical violence is marked in monuments and graves, blood remembered through stone. Cultural memory casts shadows that stretch over generations, racism, war, genocide. Blood may dry, but its echo remains. Statues are built, stories told, shadows lengthened across time. Even personally, we live in this duality. The blood of our parents flows in us, power, identity, inheritance. But we also carry shadows, memories of pain, failure, loss. Our bodies and minds are palimpsests of what was, and what continues to be. Symbolism gives form to the ineffable. Through blood and shadows, literature articulates power and memory in ways more profound than exposition ever could. Blood pulses through narrative as a symbol of strength, legacy, and cost. Shadows creep across the page as memory, loss, and the inescapable past. Together, they chart the human experience, not only what we do, but what we remember. Not only the power we wield, but the echo of that power when the light fades. To write with blood is to write with intensity, passion, and consequence. To write with shadow is to write with subtlety, pain, and reflection. And perhaps the truest stories are those that contain both, because we are not just what we do, but what remains after we have done it. Thanks for joining us on this dark descent into blood and shadows, the sinister side of ancient myths. If these chilling legends sparked your curiosity or sent a shiver down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the darker side of history. What myth shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments, we're always watching. Don't forget to share this with fellow myth lovers who dare to explore the shadows. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, every legend hides a truth, and every truth has its own shadow. See you in the next one.